So I'm just going over your sets. This is Mark. Yeah, this is looking better. The tabletop maybe could be flatter. Not sure what that is. Is that like a sculpture? It's interesting. Um, and okay, make sure when you're doing sort of camera compositions that you do sort of 16 by 9 ratio, like the 1920 by 1080, rather than this longer vertical thing. I like the cutout window in here. I think that's good. I think that you could, flesh it out with more props. Maybe put a couple picture frames on the wall, or maybe a couple other little objects to make it look a little more lived in. But yeah, you've got the basics, so this should work. This is Mario. We have a looks like a kind of outside scene, sort of an entryway, and you got a few different views. I mean, I would think a little bit more about your camera composition. And I think that, if you think of it like a movie set and you keep the camera generally pointed towards the building, and then you don't have to worry about, like, for example, a shot like this second or the third one, you would have to, what is going to be here? Does the ground suddenly stop? Are there another building here? Are there trees? And same with this, what's behind him? And you suddenly have to build all that. But if you think of a camera set and have kind of like a 180-degree sweep where you're always pointed toward these buildings, your set is more complete. You could add some more details. Think of things like drain pipes, or just look at some building reference and see what interesting things, some kind of electrical or cable box, doorbells, windows. You could come up with some stuff to, flesh it out a little bit. I like the plants here. I think that really helps a lot. But a few more features. And, this is a very high angle, like pointed down. You might be, the typical shot would be maybe something closer to eye level of the character, but not that you have to stick to that. You can sort of establish a scene with a high angle and change it throughout. But yeah, anyways, yeah, it's a good start, and I think you could flesh it out a little bit. This is looking good. The plant's really nice. I particularly like that, the texture here with the dying edges. That's really good. And The couch looks good. You got like that. You got all these textures going and wallpaper, all that stuff. The You might let's take a look at these other two. One thing you might consider with the photograph is, well, that's a very nice photograph. It always looks funny to me when the world is kind of, animated and but the photograph is real. So you could consider having a photograph, kind of doing a render of your character on some kind of a different background, and then texturing that into this photograph so it kind of fits within his world. Um, I really like how you've done the depth of field here, but I think I might compose it differently. For example, if the plant was kind of over here, you could see the character better, maybe kind of move him a little bit more on a third line and have that there. It's unusual that you would block the character unless it was some kind of reveal where the camera was kind of dollying across and you're revealing the character from behind a plant. But typically you wouldn't obscure your character quite so much. Although in general, the idea of having foreground objects is a good thing. It adds a lot of depth to the scene. But I just maybe wouldn't block the character so much with it. But that said, this is very good. You've got it, very far along. You have some nice textures. It looks like a fleshed out scene. You could always add more props. It looks like he's watching TV. Throw a remote control in there, a beverage, what have you. But the couch looks a little scaled down for him. You might scale that up a bit. Just because for the size of the character, it looks a little small to me. But yeah, really looking good. So this is Cord. Yeah, interesting shot. I can tell you're going for something dramatic here. Definitely for any kind of, when you're composing, you're going to want the 16 by 9 ratio, like the 1920 by 1080 image size. So, because this one looks a lot more square and you want that more rectangular, like it's going to be finally rendered. But yeah, the angle is interesting. I like the big hammer prop and the anvil. That's all good. Maybe some more detail on this, and I'm not sure exactly what that is there. It's hard to tell from this angle. But yeah, it looks like this is kind of getting fleshed out. You've got a few different things, um, different areas going on. Again, I'm not too sure what these different shapes are exactly, but it looks like a somewhat fleshed out seam to me, so that's good. And looks like he's lying on his bed. Yeah, maybe just a couple things on the wall, window, picture, something to flesh it out, and maybe bevel your edges here so they're not quite so sharp. If that's a bed, just to get it rounded to look more like a mattress, maybe you want to add some detail and like kind of mush it around in spots so it looks more mattress-like. But yeah, looks like you've got basic scene built, so that's good. So this is Christy. So Christy turned in a Maya file, and one thing is the assignment was to, doing some camera compositions of the scene, so we can't really see that in the Maya file unless you've done different cameras. So you have that camera, but that wouldn't be a few different compositions. So I like I'm guessing that's sort of Juicer as a spaceship, which is kind of interesting. You've got this ground with a little terrain here and a couple props, but I think that what you need is a little bit more of a scene with a background that you can animate in. So, if he's in some kind of rough terrain, it's sort of like just go, for example, you could just go way, 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 way bigger on something like this. I'll turn it around. I don't know. Sort of move it back. Scale it up. Anyway, so, something like this where you're starting to get, yeah, it would, just add a lot of detail to something like this. And then maybe some additional kind of hills or something to fill in the background so you don't see these like edges here, just some other bigger ones. And I would get more detail. I wouldn't have these kind of big rounded humps. But the idea is, maybe you want some more just terrain for him to work within. Maybe some rocks, build some rocks. If he's like landed on a planet or something, which is what I'm guessing is going on here. But yeah, give yourself just a physical surrounding to work within is the main thing. But yeah, the props look good. I just think you need to think about a few camera compositions and just kind of a sort of environment that you want to animate within. So we got James here. Yeah, the cave is looking nice. I can see you're saying here that you want to have him ducking under the although this is a little odd to have him so obscured, you might consider moving the camera lower and pointing it up a little bit more. Might make for a more interesting shot and kind of see some more of the detail and some more of the character. And yeah, that one's kind of interesting and looks pretty good. Think about putting the character on a third line. You don't always have to do it, but it's often a good choice. And it might be interesting to have him kind of come towards the camera and duck under this. But think about the composition of where he starts and where he ends up, and make sure they both look good when you end up animating that. And one thing you might add is things like loose rocks. So you have this sort of continuous surface everywhere, but maybe there's some loose rocks and pebbles on the ground just to kind of flesh it out a little bit more. But yeah, the texture looks good, and it looks and feels like rock. So nice work on that. Yuri, so Yuri did a hangar, a military hangar, and yeah, this is looking really good. There's a good sense of scale, although maybe this is a little bit small compared to his body size, because you would expect it to come up a little bit more towards his hip. But the stairs look like they have a good scale. I'm liking this thing here. It reminds me sort of a video game environment. There's always things to explode. And you've got your stack of cases here, and you've got the arched ceiling and some control thing there. So it looks like a really good environment. There's definitely room to act. You could climb stairs, you could hop over the ledge, you could there's a lot of different things you could do here. So I think this is working out well. I think that's well fleshed out, and yeah, I think what you could sometimes consider doing is looking for sort of imperfections. Maybe this isn't stacked perfectly straight, or maybe there's some aging to the sign here, or maybe there's something out of place, some other canister left behind, or leaning against something, or just a little bit to of a sort of randomness to bring it to life. But yeah, as it is, it's looking really good and a very usable set to do a little bit of animation. So this is Josh. Yeah, it's nice that you've already done some lighting here. I guess my question is this, there's a lot of good stuff going on. It gives really feels like a set that you can work within and act within and do some interesting actions. I guess what I'm wondering is this outdoors? Uh, and if so, you know, what's behind them? What will you put there? So if it sort of looks, because of this sort of fencing here, that we're outdoors, so then you might want to add things like, I don't know, a few trees here or a hillside or something to flesh out the background so that it's not just a void behind him. You could use Paint Effects trees if you want to. They're pretty easy to work with. Or yeah, or maybe there's like a big side of a barn there or something. So anyways, you'll need if it's outdoors, you'll need something behind him. But overall, it's looking really good, and the lighting really adds a lot to it. So nice work on that. So Christian's mentioning a problem with his model where some of the controls disappears when he imported it. What I recommend is that rather than import the model into your scene, import the scene into your model. So there's sort of no danger of screwing that up if you're running into these kinds of problems. Theoretically, that shouldn't happen, but that's kind of a workaround. So you have the cabin scene, and then just open up your character file first and then import the cabin into that, and then nothing should break. Um, so if these issues don't happen in that file, then problem solved. If if some of these things aren't moving with the rig, that means they're not bound or skinned or something. So I would just say turn in your current version of your character, and I'll take a look and can give you some help with that and try and see what's going on. But yeah, this is a nice cabin. I mean, it's a good sort of fleshed out thing you've got going here, and you've got a nice chair and table in front. You might think of a little bit more. I like you've got a lower angle here. That's good. Maybe a little bit more variety of shots. But I guess you have wider and a little closer. You can always try close up. And I guess what I would say is that think about, okay, well, this looks good, but what happens here? How do we get rid of the rest of this? And maybe, I don't know, put a big hillside behind it, or some trees. You could always use Paint Effects trees. It's pretty easy. I can demonstrate that if anyone's interested, but there's probably a million tutorials on YouTube on that already. Um, and yeah, and maybe make the ground not perfectly flat. Maybe put it on a hill, or one thing you can do is if you put it in a little bit of a depression, then sort of the hills that come up around it will then help create part of the background behind it, so it's not this kind of infinite flat void. The other thing is if you keep the camera sort of shots tighter to the cabin, you'll have to fill in less behind it. So if most of your shots are close enough that we don't see beyond either side of the cabin, then that helps as well. So those are a few things you can improve on, but yeah, overall it's a nice scene, and I think it'll work well. He is kind of big compared to the cabin. Maybe that's intentional. Maybe you want him to be sort of, because you'd expect a human to be shorter than the door, and he's much taller than it. But obviously he's not a human, so maybe because he's a werewolf, he's very big. But if you want him to be human size, I would, probably scale up the cabin to make it so he could fit in the doorway. And then it's a little bit. Well, let's take a look at this one again. Yeah, I guess that's okay. The chair was looking a little bit big in these shots, but maybe that's just because it was in the foreground. But make sure the point is make sure these things are proportional to each other. That this chair would be the relatively the same size compared to the door and window and those kinds of things. Yeah, good work. This is Joseph, and yeah, this little, I'm not sure exactly what we're looking at here, some kind of stand, like he's selling something maybe. Looks good. Not sure what those pieces on the side, oops, sorry, are meant to be. And I think, what you have is, oh my gosh, I already did cancel. Cancel. Yes. Um, I think what you have looks good. I just think the rest of the set needs to somehow be fleshed out a little bit. Maybe this is in front of some big, larger building, so you could just kind of do a sidewalk here and some big building face there just to fill in the background a little bit. So it feels a little bit more complete. But I mean, this should be a good little area to act within. So I mean, that should work well. But I just maybe flesh out the background a little bit more, and at the very least have some kind of ground plane. Um, but yeah, characters looking good, and camera angles are you know varied and interesting. So yeah, it's a good start. But I think you should flesh out the background. This is Richard. So yeah, this is looking good. Um, the trees are interesting, and it looks like you have the same tree over and over again. So you might look to vary them a little bit more, so it doesn't look so repeated. Maybe do a little bit more on the branches. I keep mentioning PaintFX trees. You can always lean on that if you want. Um, and yeah, and then just something to fill in the background again, so we're not looking to avoid. But what I do like about this is that the ground isn't perfectly flat, so there's some kind of variety, and that looks sort of natural the way the trees are kind of planted in the ground there. Yeah, so maybe a little bit of variety, maybe some other kind of props, just to flesh it out a little bit. At least colors and ideally textures would kind of help finish this off, and yeah, just something to kind of fill in the background, so we're not looking into a void. But yeah, it definitely fits your character. It's nice to see him in the woods. But I think with a few improvements, you've got the right idea to have this little kind of forest area to have him act within, and then just maybe flesh it out a little further. So this is Everin. So good news is it looks you have the whole background covered. So I keep mentioning on the other ones that some background needs to be filled in. But on this one, you don't have that same problem, so that's good. And I think that, if he's on some kind of alien landscape, some things that could help flesh it out, or maybe just some rocks or, other objects, so it's not just a bare thing. Maybe some sense of how he got there, why he's there, if he's flown in on a spaceship or something like that, or has some equipment with him of some kind that could be interesting. But yeah, I think a little bit more to flesh it out, but I think the basic set is good. It's a good kind of environment to act within, and it's sort of self-contained, so that works well. And then just maybe some more details to bring it to life a little bit more. This is Lupita. It's good you got the texture, the bark going on the trees, but they're looking very square, so I might, you know, start with cylinders and then kind of shape them a little bit more, and they're also just all duplicated. So yeah, I think I would put a little bit more time to give them shape if you want to have them branch out. I keep mentioning on all these because I've been seeing a lot of trees. This PaintFX trees is kind of a ready-made tree. You can just kind of pop in there, so that's good. Maybe give it a little bit more terrain, and think about what's behind him, so we fill this in, so it's not just a void. Maybe a hillside behind him coming down, and some trees and other things coming out. I'm glad to see some rocks in here, but I think those could be just have their shape varied a little bit more, so that these look, you know, like slightly modified cubes. So I think you could do a little bit more to get them more randomly rock shaped. So yeah, I think it's a good start conceptually, but I think varying the terrain, filling in the background, giving the trees a little bit better shape to them would help this out and make it better. So this is Joseph. Joseph, so the assignment was to turn in JPEGs. So the idea being you would compose the camera and turn in 3 JPEGs as it says here. And I don't know, ALS files, I don't know what those are, how to open those. So if you're sending images, um, yeah, make sure you use JPEG. I mean, I can open most file formats, I just don't, not familiar with what that is. So, um, yeah, but in the Maya, and you mentioned waterfall. I think that that's sort of a project all of on its own. So I would probably stay away from trying to do something that complicated. I did open the Maya file you sent, and yeah, it looks like you're making your trees. I mean, as long as you're doing the Paint Effects grass here, you might want to go ahead and just use some Paint Effects trees to get more variety. It's good that you got these benches. I think they could be, think about the scale of a normal bench. Maybe use some reference. Think of the thickness of the bottom and try to make it look a little bit more realistic. And then this, I'm guessing, is a fountain. The fountain, and just scale wise, I'm not. It just looks a little odd next to the character. I feel like it would. I suppose you can have fountains of any size, but it's also weird to have a fountain sort of right in the middle of the grass. So I think you could, again, look at some reference and try to duplicate it because this is looking a little odd, sort of right in the middle of the grass and sort of the size of it and this top piece and stuff like that. So, oh, is this the thing that's emitting water? I get it. Okay. Either way, you'd probably have something that would sort of catch the water at the bottom of a typical fountain and not go like right into the grass. So, anyways, use some reference and don't try to do moving water. It's again, that's sort of its whole own project of its own. And if this is a building here, this big plane, uh, or I don't know what it is exactly, but yeah, maybe just flesh out something so there's a background here. Maybe you had an image on that. I don't know. Um, but yeah, so I think it's a good start, but I think you could improve some of this a little bit more. Maybe make the terrain not perfectly flat too is always nice.